So who's the best QB and wide receiver to stack in fantasy football in 2025? But first, I want to talk about the importance of stacking QBs and wide receivers. And before you fast forward to the people that I'm telling you are the best stacks, I would recommend you watch this portion because you can save yourself a lot of heartache, turmoil, trouble, and hopefully have a better chance at winning in 2025. If you just watch this little bit right here, for me, when it comes to QB wide receiver stacks, it's actually one of my favorite things to talk about because again, it funnels into the same category for me, which is like game theory. I guess I got to combine two of my loves. I got to combine football and strategy games into one. Bang, fantasy football, here we go. Okay. So why is QB wide receivers talked about so much? Because you hear about stacking. Okay, well, the reason why is you're obviously, if you already know, you already know, but you're going to have spike weeks, which are going to be great, and they're going to help you win weeks, and they're going to help you essentially have an opportunity to have a higher variance on your high weeks. Now, if you are somebody who's in a best ball format, this is the format where you're going to probably most likely want to use it. Why? Because in best ball formats, you draft your lineup, you set it, you forget it for the rest of the season. You're looking for spike weeks. You're looking for weeks where you have maybe a Burrow Chase stack go off for 50 points for Jamar Chase and 35, 40 points for Joe Burrow, and you have smashed that week. What this allows you to do again in best ball, because the idea is to score as many points as possible to advance further and further, those spike weeks are really, really important. Obviously, your down weeks aren't quite as important because when you have other QBs and wide receivers, they can kind of carry those weeks when Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase, as an example, don't do as well. So it's not too big of a problem. The other format that it makes a lot of sense to have QB and wide receiver stacks is in Dynasty. It gives you a good chance in Dynasty to be able to be elite and have higher scoring weeks and be able to advance and hopefully get into your playoffs and win your championship. On the flip side, if you have a horrible stack, you're going to do really poorly, or have a stack that's subpar, then they're going to do pretty poor. That should move down your wins and increase your losses, and this means you're going to have a better draft pick. So in both of those situations, whether it's best ball or dynasty formats, obviously in best ball, you'd love to live in a world where all you had was spike weeks, but you'll live with the down weeks from a Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase stack because your other QBs and wide receivers will pick up the slack. And obviously same thing in a dynasty format. If they just suck and it's a crappy stack, no worries, you'll get a better draft pick. But again, if you have like the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase stack, it'll obviously set you up where you're going to have a better chance, again, to make your playoffs and hopefully win your league. So now transitioning to the third and final option, which I feel like is what most people realistically do, is going to be a redraft league. The biggest problem with redraft leagues is, yes, we are looking for like a higher performing team because, you know, most people are going to score around like an average score in fantasy football redrafts, especially in 12-man leagues. The biggest thing that we need to think about, though, is we're not necessarily always looking for those crazy high variance weeks that are super, super high, because we're just trying to score enough points to win enough weeks to get in the playoffs and have a good enough team to compete and hopefully win. The problem when you have that high variance that you want, when you have a better chance for spike weeks for a dynasty format or for a best ball format, is that in redraft, you have the option to pick up other players as you go. That's obviously a benefit you don't get to have when you're in best ball. The other big thing to keep in mind that's really, really important is the fact that if that QB gets injured or that wide receiver gets injured or one of them starts to have a really bad year or not play as well, whatever it is, that stack that you may have had to reach for, you may have had to reach to get Joe Burrow to pair him with Jamar Chase. You may have had to reach to pair another QB and a wide receiver together when it would have made more sense to take a slightly better player. So you're missing out on some upside in your drafts. You're also setting yourself up where there could be a catastrophic implosion during your redraft season if something happens to that stack. Vis-a-vis, if you think about when Jamar Chase went down, Joe Burrow's production went down a couple years ago, and in reverse, when Joe Burrow went down and his backup was playing for a chunk of the year, Jamar Chase wasn't as efficient and elite as well. So it can kind of derail your whole thing because you could have a situation where there's an injury or they're just not performing as well, and it starts to drag down your overall scoring potential on your team. Had you just drafted more of an elite QB, top 5, top 8 guy, and then drafted a top 5, top 10 guy at the wide receiver position and kind of just separated them entirely. But as you move to like smaller leagues, like a 10-man or an 8-man, stacking QBs and wide receivers starts to make more sense. Why? Because when you're drafting, there's going to be better potential out there for you to pick up along the way. So most people's average scoring is going to be dramatically elevated because their actual depth is not really always depth. A lot of times it's just quality starters, and that's who's on their bench. So it does give you a distinct way to have better spike week potential, kind of like in best ball or in dynasty. Because again, if everybody has a really good roster and a pretty good bench, the only way you're going to be able to essentially give yourself an edge is if you have those stacks. Obviously, again, 10-man, you're kind of in the middle, but 8-man, those stacks really do come into play. Whether it's a QB wide receiver or a QB tight end, it will just give you a little bit better of a chance for spike week potential to win your actual weeks as you go. And I don't think when you look at the analytics, there is not a huge difference between taking, again, a top 10 QB and a top 10 wide receiver from two different teams, and then a top 10 QB and a top 10 wide receiver on the same team within redraft formats. Because again, you're not necessarily looking for spike weeks unless you're in a smaller league size. You're looking to have the best upside possible with the best amount of consistency and the least amount of risk. Where in best ball and dynasty, you're looking for more risk, more upside. Either you're going to win or you're just going to lose, and that's it. So who do I think are the best stacks in 2025? Get to the end right here for you guys. So for people that want to fast forward, here you go. The best stacks, in my opinion, the easiest one that everyone already knows is going to be Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow. I think you're probably going to have to reach on Joe Burrow a little bit. Another good stack, in my opinion, is going to be Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin. I think that one's probably pretty realistic for most people regardless of where you're drafting at. Another one that I do really like is Baker Mayfield. Whether you pair him with Mike Evans or Emeka Egbuka, I kind of like the Emeka Egbuka one because you're getting him so much later than Mike Evans. So I feel like there's a lot of value in that stack right there. My last two are obviously later drafted QBs, so you pretty much can get the stack for almost free. A little bit more risk because we don't necessarily know how crazy high the upside is going to be, but I think the stack is going to be pretty dynamic. The first being CeeDee Lamb with Dak Prescott, or if you feel real spicy, you go George Pickens with Dak Prescott. If you're able to get CD in the first round, you pretty much can get Dak at the very end of your draft. He is going to be one of the last quarterbacks drafted, if he's drafted at all. I'm going to do a whole nother video on the Dak Prescott thing because I have a vision of him returning to a top 5 QB in fantasy football in 2025. I'll tell you all about it. Look forward in the future. The other stack that I'm really in on is going to be none other than Drake May with either Stephon Diggs or Kyle Williams. I'm not as sure about Kyle Williams. I like his upside potential, but I know that Stephon Diggs last season, I said it in another video of mine, he was only 0.9 PPR points behind his pace of 2023, where he finishes a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy football. He did that last year on the Texans, where he was the wide receiver number 2 on his team behind Nico Collins. So I think that there's a real reality where you're getting Drake May as an undrafted QB who has a lot of rushing upside, who's going to be in a highly elevated offense, highly elevated offensive line. The whole situation is going to be a lot better for Drake May, and I think Stephon Diggs is going to easily be the number 1 wide receiver. He's going to have a huge target share on this team. He's going to be the guy. So I think that, again, you can get Stephon Diggs pretty late in your drafts, and you can get Drake May probably undrafted in most of your drafts. So if you want to take another QB earlier, you can. Maybe not like early, but somewhere in the middle of the rounds, you could. And then you could take Drake May with one of your last picks if you really wanted to be safe about it. But I do think that Stephon Diggs and Drake May stacked would be a really good one going into 2025. Those are my favorite ones, at least. If you take one of those two guys, especially, and it's because you watched this video and you stack them the right way, go into the comments if you win and let me know in about, 6 months from now that you won. I would greatly appreciate it. Make me super happy. You don't have to, but it would, warm my heart just a little bit. But anyways, hopefully this video helps you get a little bit closer to winning your fantasy football championship in 2025. Maybe you are somebody out there who you're like, you know what? I already know my stacks. I already know my first few rounds, but maybe you're somebody out there who needs some help with some late round league winning picks, and you don't want to hear about the ones everyone else is talking about on YouTube or social media. You want some of the spicy ones that are a little bit quieter out there, or maybe not talked about as much. There will be a video somewhere around here, and there's other ones on the channel as well. Feel free to check those out. Hopefully those help you as well. Hopefully I'll see you guys again hopefully you guys will see me again real soon. And until then, y'all have a blessed day. Bye.